About 15 years ago, early in my career as a mental health specialist, I had a client I'll call now. She was in her 50s, white, and had a long history of mental health and substance use challenges. I called ahead and scheduled our first home visit. When I arrived in her neighborhood, it was a cluster of trailer homes with no numbers or names. I wasn't sure which one was hers, so I knocked at the first home I saw. An elderly Black woman came to the door. I asked her if Nell lived there. She said, "Wrong house, baby. Nell lives behind me." I thanked her and followed and went behind to the home behind hers. When I arrived at that home, I knocked on the door, and a white man came to the door. He looked me up and down and yelled, "Nigga, why are you at my front door?" Y'all, I froze. I was shocked by his reaction to me simply knocking at the door. In that moment, I had two options. I could leave and explain to my supervisor why I didn't make contact, or I could take a deep breath, regain my composure, and try again. And I had bills. I said, "Sir, I'm here to meet Nell. She told me to come to this address." Before I could finish my sentence, he slammed the door in my face. My feelings immediately shifted from shock to anger. I was pissed. I walked back to my car, about to leave, and I heard a woman's voice yell out, "Wait, over here." It was Nell waving me back over. Come on, he's harmless. Harmless. Yeah. All right. I hesitated, but I followed her in her home. I started that session feeling raw, on guard, uncomfortable, and confused. But by the end of that visit, I realized something. Staying in discomfort is what planted the seed of a belief that has carried my work ever since. Sometimes change requires leaning into discomfort, even when it feels unbearable. Years later, I participated in racial healing circles with a group of therapists, and I carried Nell's story with me. Racial healing isn't just needed in the United States. South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission shows us how even deeply entrenched divisions can be healed through shared dialogue and accountability. In our circles, we seek to understand each other through truth-telling, deep listening, and a commitment to action. This kind of work requires more than just good intentions. It requires confronting privilege, both our own and that of others. Yes, we all have privilege. Privilege doesn't align with one group or identity. It exists on a spectrum. It doesn't mean you haven't faced hardships, but it means that certain struggles weren't solely tied to your identity. Take me for an example. I'm a light-skinned Black woman who grew up in a lower-class family that had access to higher education, which led to my career as a therapist. I know I carry privilege. This was a difficult concept to understand at first. It made me question how my own actions could unintentionally cause harm to others. But over time, I realized privilege isn't something to be ashamed of. It's about recognizing it and using it responsibly. There are various types of privilege. Consider class privilege, where access to resources causes divisions within our own communities. Or colorism, where lighter skin tones are favored. And even gender privilege, where men may unintentionally uphold patriarchal systems that cause harm to women and LGBTQ plus individuals. Understanding privilege helps us to hold ourselves accountable for our own actions and the actions of others. One challenge we faced in our racial healing circles involved a white woman. She would make statements like, "Are you sure that's about race?" Or, "I didn't mean to offend you, but..." Often she would center herself in conversations, making it about her feelings instead of hearing the harm of others. She expected people of color to explain to her her actions instead of going to do her own work. At a certain point, white participants met with her privately to remove the burden of people of color, including myself, and calling out her behaviors. She apologized and said she would step back to go do her work. So y'all know I was side-eyeing her. A few weeks later, she came back with no communication about what had changed. In that moment, we highlighted a particular important point. Racial healing isn't something you can step in and out of. You must commit to it. Another powerful moment included Jay, a Black woman. She shared her frustrations with comments like, "Let's not make this about race," or "You're so strong for dealing with that." Naomi, a white woman, sat silently listening to Jay, realizing that her silence was also harmful. She later spoke up and said she would commit to no longer waiting for people of color to tell her when it was enough. Naomi's willingness to act demonstrated the power of collective will. Others were inspired by her and made efforts to figure out how they could also step up. Liz, a white presenting mixed race woman of Choctaw and European ancestry, shared how the racial healing circles helped her to deal with the discomfort of being deemed not Native enough. She shared that in the circles, she was able to confront discomfort, identify systemic inequalities, and participate more authentically in collective growth. You see, that's the beauty of racial healing circles. When we lean in, even when it's difficult, we create opportunities for growth. Thinking back to my time with Now, eventually I was able to change that man's view of me and how he saw Black people. And in time, I was able to learn more about his story and what shaped his hatred. But let me be clear. My decision to stay and support Now wasn't just about courage. It was about my own financial needs. It was about my judgment of the risk and being early in my career. You don't have to choose the same path as me. But we all must commit to confronting racism. It will require all of us to do that work. Angela Davis once said, "Racism is so deeply embedded in the fabric of our society, we often swim in it without realizing it's the water all around us." That man's hatred was a product of a system that taught him to dehumanize me. But by standing there in front of him, I became living proof that his world was changing, whether he liked it or not. The work of changing society isn't easy. It requires vulnerability, accountability, and ongoing growth. But when we lean in, when we stay in the room, even when it feels unbearable, we create spaces for change to begin. Because racial healing isn't just personal, it's generational. We must all commit to do our part to leave a legacy of inclusion, justice, and love for the world we leave behind. So I'll leave you with this. How will you lean into discomfort? How will you use your privilege to change the world around you? I'm grateful for the members of the Therapist Collective who allowed me to share our stories so we can inspire you all to create your own. Thank you.